brand new age. The world is calling, turn the page. Be an agent of change, don't look away. It starts with you today. Make a difference, rise and shine. Live the world, one heart, one mind. This is the optimal life with Elliot, where hope begins and dreams are set.
Welcome to the first of many episodes of the Optimal Life podcast. My name is Elliot Barnett, and I'm really excited for you to be here with me to learn how to help others or help yourself live an optimal life. I'm not going to talk too much about myself in these episodes. If you do want to learn a little bit more about me, you can click over to elliotbarnett.com and click on the About section. But I do think it's important to understand why we're here together today. How did we get here? And why am I so passionate about empowering others to be agents of change in the new era of mental health? Well, it started when I was in my teens and in my early 20s, struggling with my own challenges, just like so many young adults do. And I was following the advice that so many others do, is go seek help in the mental health industry. So I did just that. I found myself a therapist. Her name was Linda. She was a super nice lady. And we sat down and had some really wonderful conversations. The thing is, I had some classes and training in neuroscience and psychology, but my main focus through college was computer science and physics. I kind of look at everything as an engineer, as a scientist, and a researcher, and as a problem solver. So I sat there listening to Linda and having these conversations, and although it made me feel a little bit better, it didn't really seem to be solving my problem. And I was thinking to myself, if I feel like this, maybe other people do. And I didn't know what it was, but there just seemed to be something missing. There was some gap, and I didn't, of course, at the time really know what that was. But as I started to research the industry a little bit, I realized that there actually really was a gap. And if you looked at how the industry was and still is, and had been for a long time, if the industry had made all the strides that they claim to have made from the early psychotherapies of the early 1900s through the modern age, then people should be doing a whole lot better. I mean, you can make those arguments in medicine, in physical healthcare. We've made tremendous strides over the years. So if the research and the development in the mental health industry was exactly what they claimed it to be, then we should see the statistics support that. But if you look around, people are all taking medication, or a lot of people taking medications and going to therapists, but they're not doing all that much better. And the statistics actually show the trend of an increase in mental health challenges. Now you might say that that's because we are recognizing them more, it's more accepted. But when you start really digging down into the research, you start realizing that there are tremendous amounts of gaps in the industry. And I wanted to help myself. I wanted to improve my own mental health, but I also wanted to, because I'm passionate about helping others, I wanted to really help other people as well. It seemed to me that the medicalized model that had started in the 40s and 50s, maybe there was something wrong with that. I didn't really know at the time what it was, but certainly you could look at the mental health industry and see that it was very unaffordable, largely inaccessible. It was very hard to get therapists, or maybe it was not really accessible to lower income folks or people maybe without insurance. And it was largely ineffective. And again, I didn't know what the gaps were, but it seemed to me that there was more of a foundational level that maybe wasn't being addressed, that was maybe the driving force behind a lot of the challenges that people had. So I set out to see if I could figure it out. And I embarked on an amazing journey of decades of research that culminated in 2015 that resulted in cognitive response therapy. And I'll touch on a little bit about the cognitive response therapy, a little bit of the research. I'll do future episodes that will go into that in a little bit more detail, and how the follow-on programs, with the latest one being the rate framework, how those all kind of play into this. But if you look at how, say, coaches approach helping people, they really focus on goals and setting what the definitions of success and potentially changing habits. When you get to therapists, they're really looking at helping people with more fundamental issues, trauma, some of the behavioral issues. The thing is that CRT and what I developed is really addressing the foundational layer. It's really the unconscious drivers. What is acting on your behalf that holistically drives human behavior? And if you think about, if you were to build a skyscraper, where would you spend most of your time? Of course, it would be on the foundation. You would not want to start layering floors on top of a faulty foundation. And what I found through my research was that most of these approaches, both certainly on the coaching side, but even on the therapist side, although they were helping in some ways, they were building floors on top of a faulty foundation and wondering why people were still struggling. So I want to talk a little bit about the research, but first let's define what I mean by living an optimal life, since that's the name of the podcast and really have been my passion for all these years to empower people to live their optimal life. The definition of living an optimal life is a life full of purposeful meaning aligned towards success milestones. All right, let's break that down together. Purpose is intent, meaning is value. So the question becomes, what is the intended value of your life? And we know that we are better when we are moving towards something greater for ourselves and for others. And we also know that success is not some type of destination. We don't climb the mountain of life and put a flag in the top of the mountain and say we've declared victory and we've created the ultimate success. We're going to achieve many success milestones along the journey of our life. So the question becomes, what is the intended value of your life, and how do you create success milestones that deliver value to the world, that you receive value back, you then transform that value and then give it back, and you create these amazing reciprocal loops between the world and yourself, adding value, getting value back, transforming that value and giving it back. So you're always adding value and you're always moving towards something greater for yourself and for others. So it's not a destination. Living an optimal life is not a clear state that you achieve. It's the way that you live your life. So let's briefly talk about the 3 research studies, and I'll do an entire episode that will really double, triple click on these, but just really briefly so you can understand how do we achieve living an optimal life, and how does CRT and things like the RATE framework, really how does that help people through either certification programs to help others, or how does that personally help the individual? What I started off with is understanding that the question that a therapist asks, tell me a little bit about yourself, is actually a really hard question to answer. It's called the introspection illusion. We just don't know ourselves all that well. We don't know ourselves as well as we need to, or even that we think we do, in order to make the changes or live the life that we want. So the very first thing is to understand, how do we overcome that? And what I found in my research study is that by using language, the language that somebody uses to describe themselves might not really be exactly who they are, but it must at least refer to who they are. And if we could just create a strategy that we could use that language to more reveal who the person is, we could overcome or at least mitigate this bias of the introspection illusion. And that's exactly what the research study showed. I created a system called the Language Association and Categorization System. It became a therapeutic asset that a therapist or a coach could use to help overcome or at least mitigate this bias. As soon as you learn more about yourself, you have a better starting point. You can start to understand who you are now, who you need to be to live the life that you want, and then effectively form a strategy to close the gap. It also helps build a connection between the person that's giving help and person receiving help. That's called therapeutic transference. The more positive that is, the more positive the effects can be, and the more productive the conversations can be. The second study used that LACS, that therapeutic asset, to address what we called core disharmonies. Again, I'll do an entire episode on personalities and identities and what we call personas. But the long and short of it is, we are not, of course, the same person in all different situations. That would be very strange. We're not going to be the same with our boss that we are with friends. We're not going to be the same with acquaintances than we are with our significant others. The point is, that's very, very normal. The problem becomes when we want people to perceive or receive us in particular ways, but that's not really who we are inside. And these inner disconnects or core disharmonies cause a stress response of the body. Now, we all know what stress does on the body for physical health, and physical health is mental health, and mental health is physical health. They're inextricably tied. So the hypothesis is if we could mitigate these disconnects, this internal dissonance, these core disharmonies, then we could increase subjective well-being by decreasing those stress levels and increase the mental well-being of the individual. And that was exactly what I showed in that research study. Using all of this knowledge and power through the first two research studies, I was able to form a third research study that pulled it all together. And this was focused on what we call predictive response cycles. We live in habitual cycles, and I'll do a deep dive on how the unconscious and the mind is a prediction machine. The predictions, it's a guess as to what your mind thinks you need to know next in order to survive your next moment. It's not about thriving. It's not about some type of future success. It's about surviving your next moment, moving you away from threat and towards safety. But we get into these habitual cycles. The mind generates a prediction, that guess. It generates a response. We get some type of feedback from our environment. That feedback is fed back into our minds. The mind then generates the next prediction. We generate a response. Wash, rinse, repeat. So these cycles over and over again would all be fine if we're living the life that we want, but if we're not, then that's exactly the opportunity that we need to take in order to train our unconscious by mindfully intervening in these cycles and teaching our unconscious what we need as far as both energy and information in our moment. So again, I'll go into more detail about that in the future, but these three studies really pulled all together to form cognitive response therapy and really empowered to build that healthy and strong foundation. Once you have that, then you can overcome the introspection illusion, know yourself better. You've resolved the core disharmonies, so you've resolved that inner tension within your body. You've learned how to disrupt and retrain these predictive response cycles, so you're starting to show up better in your life. And we've also built into cognitive response therapy the overall physiological underpinnings of mental health problems. And I'll do a whole episode on the metabolic nature of mental health, and addressing the metabolic dysfunctions really addresses a lot of mental health issues. Once you have that strong foundation that cognitive response therapy provides, then you can build upon it. That's where the ARATE framework comes in. ARATE stands for awareness, response, action, effort, and time. Cognitive response therapy really covers the first two phases, which is awareness and response. Most coaching frameworks and even a lot of therapeutic approaches really focused on the action, effort, and time aspect of things. But again, unless you have that healthy and strong foundation to build upon, the person's going to continue to struggle. So following the framework of ARATE, you've addressed those foundational challenges. Then you can be more effective in organizing your actions, your effort, and organizing time so you can live an optimal life. Why, again, am I so passionate about this? The bottom line is that the mental health industry has not served the public the way that we all need it to. It's largely inaccessible, largely unaffordable, and largely ineffective. We want to make the mental health industry more affordable, accessible, and effective. And the only way to do that is to introduce new approaches that will be disruptive. I was not indoctrinated into the current paradigms when I was in my 20s and I started this research evolution, which has been over 25 years now. I was not indoctrinated into the current paradigm. I was able to take a fresh look at the industry, really understand the history of how we got here from the early 1900s to the medicalization of mental health in the 40s and 50s, how the DSM evolved to categorize people with labels of symptoms rather than the underlying causes. When somebody says they're labeled with bipolar, ADHD, or all these hundreds of categories that are in the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, that the mental health professionals use to label people with mental health illnesses, diseases, and disorders, what they're doing is they are labeling the symptoms of the underlying metabolic issues the person has and the way the nervous system has been conditioned. What we want to do is we want to take an entirely fresh look at how we categorize people, how we address the underlying causes of the mental health challenges that people have, so they can break free from these things and these what is holding them back in their life and live the life that they deserve, their optimal life. We want to usher in a new era of mental health, making it more affordable, accessible, and effective. So in the future episodes, we're going to really introduce more of the science behind here. We're going to have some research scientists as my guests. We're going to have other practitioners that'll be my guests here. We'll have exciting conversations and really exciting time together to really learn how to help empower other people to live their optimal life, but also empower the individual listener to live the life that they deserve. I would encourage you to reach out to me through elliottbarnett.com. Be an active participant here. We want to make sure that we are providing the value that you all deserve, that you all expect. We have amazing certification programs in cognitive response therapy and the RATE framework now, again, to empower people to be agents of change in the new era of mental health. This is going to be an exciting journey that we're going to be taking together to really help make sure that the mental health industry is exactly what we want it to be. It is ripe for a revolution, and it is going to be all the coaches and the mental health professionals and you as individuals that are listening to this podcast that can really make it happen. You can make a difference. You can be an agent of change in the new era of mental health and make a positive difference in your life and in other people's lives. So until next time, I'll leave you with this. Your limit is beyond where you've chosen it to be. We can make this happen together.